Hello, fine folks, and welcome to Booghy Plays. Today I'm not playing. Today, I think, today here, today in the US, because it's morning there. I am. I have my guest. I'm playing with questions, as I always say. I'm not playing, and I am. Oh, you have to close that. You need to. You need to. Sorry, kill the sound. Yeah. So sorry for that. Some background stuff. Some background stuff. Uh, caught, caught it live. Again, this today I've been doing an interview. My guest today is a designer which is getting more and more known. He did his latest game, his latest let's call it success, is Endless Winter, Paleo Americans. The first game which caught my attention was Rurik, Dawn of Kiev. Today we're going to talk a bit with him about his games and about his journey. My guest today is Stan Kordonskiy. Welcome to Booghy Plays, Stan. And how are you?
Hey, hi. Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
How do you feel?
I feel pretty good. Yeah, I'm looking forward to this interview. So yeah, let's do it.
My yeah, where you are in Jacksonville?
No. That was on my old Skype. I never changed it. I've been living in Milwaukee, Wisconsin for the past I don't know, 12 years or so.
Wisconsin is north.
Yeah,
North.
Wisconsin is just north of like Chicago, if you know, like on the Great Lakes. It's on Lake Michigan. So it's we got about a foot of snow outside right now, and it's about -5 Celsius right now. So
Oh, so still snow out there.
oh yeah.
Still snow. Yeah. That 70s show was in Wisconsin, right?
Yeah, that was it's
It
yes,
was
exactly. I
set
think
in seven.
it's set in Wisconsin. So things changed since the 70s, but the weather hasn't.
Hasn't that much. Um, so we will get to the interview. As I've said, it has two parts. The first part is about you, and the second part also about you. But it's a round of questions, a round of faster questions. The second part. So let's get to the first part. And my first question. Let's go to the beginnings. And my first question is, where were you born, and where did you grow up?
So I was born in a city of Simferopol in Crimea.
Ooh.
Was born in a Soviet Union times
Yep.
because I'm older than people people probably think. But anyway, so that's where I was born. That's where I grew up. I lived in the local, I grew up in apartment buildings, went to, local schools and everything like that. Just kind of spent my whole life in Simferopol up until the time that my family immigrated to the United States
So
in
you are born in
late
Ukraine, right?
we obviously living through this really, tragic kind of
Yeah.
political times, but the timeline for those who aren't like keeping up on the news is Crimea was Soviet Union, 91, fall of the Soviet Union, it becomes part of Ukraine. We like briefly autonomous, like we're like autonomous Republic of Crimea as a in Ukraine. So there's like a very turbulent political times in the 90s. Those who lived through like the 90s in the former Soviet Union kind of know how crazy it was. Then I immigrate. It's as a
Don't
Ukrainian
don't don't
citizen,
don't jump. Don't jump too fast.
yeah,
Don't jump. Don't jump.
sure.
When you were born there. You're born in the 70s.
Yeah, so I was born in 79.
79. Okay.
Yeah. So
Uh,
I lived basically through the fall of the whole thing.
you lived through it. How is it? How was it? I grew up. I'm born in the beginning of the 80s in Romania. So still a communist country. So
Yeah, for
probably your
sure.
childhood was a lot of we had a closer childhood. How was growing up in Simferopol in Ukraine? What is there to do? What could you do there as a child?
Well, Simferopol is so Crimea is just a quite a beautiful place. Well, at least it used to be before the annexation. I don't know what it is like now, but it used to be the place that people wanted to live in. People would vacation there. We had wineries, we had really nice like resorts. Probably like one of the best places in this former Soviet Union, and then later in Ukraine to vacation. And so I was lucky enough to live somewhere that people would like take vacations to go to. And I just lived there. So that was a pretty sweet deal. Like, so we would go, we'll always take these really nice summer vacation. There's plenty of like really beautiful nature. There's like mountains, all these things to hike. As far as everything else goes, it was pretty typical, Soviet life. We were always short on everything, water shortages, electricity
Good.
shortages, food shortages, toilet paper shortages, like you name it. So that was pretty normal, like all
Yeah.
over former Soviet country, Romania, all the places that kind of had this imposed Soviet regime on them. So, but I was a kid, I was pretty carefree. My parents took care of us. So we really didn't like carry the world on our shoulders. So we had a pretty happy childhood, had portraits of Lenin everywhere, had to like
Statues of
recite
Lenin.
the pledge of the young pioneer,
Yeah.
standing there saying how you were gonna like honor the regime or whatever, or you got a bad grade on your
Behavior.
uh, lessons if you didn't say what
Yeah.
you were supposed to say. But that only lasted again till 91, so I was only like
12.
12 at the
Yeah.
time,
Yeah.
I think, right? Am I
Yeah.
counting right? 12,
Yeah.
13. So I didn't really like live through it as an adult, if that makes sense. So I have kind of like a hazy,
Yeah.
idea of what it was like. And then things change rapidly. But yeah, I wouldn't recommend living in communism if anybody wants to know. One star, do not recommend.
Yeah, yeah. It's pretty much a standard childhood for kids who grew up in ex-communist countries. The only thing is that Romania was not ruled by. It was autonomous practically from 1964, so we weren't under. There was the influence of the Varsovia Treaty, but
Hmm.
it wasn't as straight as there were in different countries like Ukraine or Crimea, for let's call it. What did you do? Do you have what do you usually when I was a child there was a lot of playing outside. Before I get to this, what were your parents' professions?
So my parents both worked in the office. My dad, he's an architect by education. So he worked in a like an architectural bureau that, everything was government
Yeah,
owned. So it wasn't like a private company.
yeah,
So he was an employee of the state. His job was like to design and oversee construction of whatever buildings
the
the
state.
state told them
Yeah,
to make. And then my mom, she worked for also state-owned like recycling company, basically the company that would collect and recycle, paper and metal and things like that. And she was kind of like a CPA type, CPA type staff. So also, everything is just you kind of go to work and they give you a little bit of money in exchange. No one really has a say. Everything is kind of pre-planned, predetermined. But she was educated as a teacher. Actually, she worked as a teacher briefly, but then later in life she kind of fell into this like kind of CPA accounting type of position with this big recycling company, and that's where they worked until we left.
I see. And growing up, did you have any siblings?
Yeah, I have a sister. My whole family has been immigrated together, so we've all been living
I
here. So
see.
yeah, me and my sister grew up all together.
There's a big difference between you, age of
Just 4 years.
four
She's
years.
4 years
Oh,
younger than I am,
okay,
so not huge.
not huge. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So growing up, did you, as when I was growing up, there was a lot of playing outside. playing football, playing all different kinds of sports. Was that the case there also?
Well, yeah, playing outside a lot. Again, so Crimea, the climate is very mild, so there's hardly any like snow or harsh winters. Spring is really early, winters are really mild, so you can be outside pretty much all the time. And yeah, I spend most of my free time outside because we had three channels, right, on our TV. They were all government owned.
Yep.
There was like one cartoon a day that they would show at like 8 o'clock. So if you didn't come home at 8 o'clock and tuned into this one channel, you didn't get to see the cartoon, whatever cartoon it was that day. So that was like my routine, just be outside, get home by 8 so I can watch the one cartoon for the day. And and then you have dinner and you go to bed. But yeah, playing sports outside, just playing outside. There was nothing to do indoors. I mean, I like to read books. My family was lucky enough to actually have a nice library of books they collected over their lives. So I had like a pretty decent selection of reading. So I grew up reading a ton. But other than that and going to school, any free time you had, you just, you put your clothes on and you just ran downstairs to the yard and just did whatever, kicked the can around, because that was like the center of your life as a kid, and as an adult too. I mean, there's plenty of adults hanging out outside too.
I see. Um, so, but did you play, as I hear you talk, in a way reminisce my own childhood. Uh, did you, by any chance, play any games? Were there any games, board games, one way or I don't know, getting
Yeah,
there?
so we had some like roll and moves, things like shoots and ladders types games, like really simple mass market games. I think the first like real game I saw, it was my uncle's copy of Monopoly that was in Polish. So he had a Polish friend and he like traveled and somehow he brought back this Monopoly game. I had no idea what any of it said because it was all in Polish, but I liked playing with it because I thought it looked really beautiful and interesting and didn't look like any other games I saw. So it was just kind of like a toy almost for me. And then we got some influx of games on the market. Like I remember I had this Risk game. It was like Risk in Space type game
when
where it just
when
basically risk rules, but it was like futuristic. And it was weird because I've never actually seen like real Risk. So I thought, that was like the first and only Risk I've seen. And some other games like Russian version of Monopoly, Russian version of all these kind of mass market games came in a little bit later, but they were like kind of expensive and kind of like not readily available necessarily. So what we played a lot is games like chess, checkers, all different card
card
games.
games, yeah.
So we had, board games, but they were more like traditional, like backgammon, things like that. So we
Yep.
played a ton of that.
Yep. It's like it was the same thing. It was uniform. How to say it was everywhere. It was the same in
Yeah.
the
Yeah, that was
excursion.
I think that was the idea is that we're all kind of
Yeah,
doing the same things everywhere. Like whatever the government decided we should be all playing chess.
yeah.
So we're all playing chess, I guess.
Um, Everything that came from the West was bad. Everything that we invent is good. So we have a copy. We had copies of of what West invented.
Right. Or, you could always say that, the leader invented chess. Who's to say otherwise?
Yeah. And what were your interests when you were growing up?
Well, reading a lot. Like I said, there was really nothing to watch. This is before, internet, smart devices.
Yeah.
Video games existed in the West, not so much like I had some experience with video games in arcades, but barely anything at home until like the 90s. So we were like late, like almost no one had, Nintendos or Segas or anything like that. So reading, just a lot of reading, a lot of, I had some interest in sports, although I never like, to be on the team in those days, you had to be like exceptional. There was no like rec leagues or like after school,
Yep.
sports. You
Yep.
either like dedicated your whole life to playing for the state and became like a professional
Uh,
amateur athlete, or you just played in the backyard, or in the yard. And that's what we did. We played a little basketball, a little soccer, whatever, rolled around in the dirt, stuff like that. I mean, not like I said, it was like I had a really busy childhood. Like actually I was in the art school briefly too. So my parents, like, they were enrolling me in these things they could enroll me in. Like I was in a chess club for a small period of time. Not a good chess player, by the way, in case you're wondering. Pretty terrible at it. Then I was in art school for a few years, kind of like after school thing. They kind of teach you. Also, like very structured, very like soul crushing. Like you will sit here and you draw this apple, and it must be as I say it is. And if your shading is off, this is like we're talking like 11, 12-year-old kids sitting there and they're like, your cross hatching is wrong. You holding the pencil wrong. Like
yeah.
really kind of like stifling, soul crushing art education I received that kind of knocked the taste of art out of my mouth until I became an adult. And I realized, oh, art is actually about self expression and having fun. It's not about someone telling you like drew a vase incorrectly and like redo it.
Yeah.
So, stuff like that.
Yeah. Somehow, yeah, I grew up the same, but somehow that way of growing up, in a way, yeah, it created trauma, but it made a man out of you.
Yeah, I mean it's like any upbringing. I think you always go through something when you're growing up,
Yeah,
right? So it's not about whether it was harder growing up in that environment, I think, or easier than in the West. It was different for sure. And I think it does create a different like personality types, kind
yeah,
of like more cynical, more like skeptical,
yeah,
you know? Whereas I think like West created some of these like really, trusting kind of, um, you know, I don't know. It's just a big generalization, but I found folks from like a former Eastern Bloc tend to be a little more skeptical of things they hear and see.
see,
Not
yeah,
everyone, of course, and a little bit more like stoic, maybe is the
yeah.
word,
Not,
about stuff, not really expecting too much from the government, from like strangers, right? We're like always like thinking, sure, I need to have a plan B, basically, in case, whoever I'm going to, whatever authority I'm reaching out to refuses to help me. I need to have a plan B. How am I going to help
help myself,
myself?
yeah. Let's
Right.
say we're less gullible.
Yeah,
Uh,
definitely less gullible in some ways.
yeah,
In others, though, I don't know. I see what's going on with propaganda still, with this war, and everything, and I'm kind of shocked that folks are still sort of like
Ye-
believing the propaganda. You would think all these years, but I guess it's like we're dealing with like a new type of propaganda, which people don't have
yeah,
immunity against.
yeah, but propaganda is on both sides. So, so
Yeah.
now coming back, when so you studied high school in Crimea also?
Yeah, no, I graduated, like I said, I lived there for, a good chunk of time. So I attended a school, I graduated a school, and I even got into like partial year of college right
University?
before we immigrated.
Yeah. So what year did you immigrate?
97. I
97.
arrived in the United States in 97.
So you were, I don't know, 18, 18,
Yeah,
9.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yep, I was 18 years. Yep.
So what did you start studying, and what did you start studying when you arrived in the States?
At first I was just taking like English classes and things like that. Until I kind of get my English language good enough. And then I applied for a fire science, which is like what people study to become like a fire department, like a firefighter.
Ah, I see.
And that was my like first degree. Is I went to school for that actually, and I got this degree in fire science. That I graduated from that, and then I was kind of looking for a job, and I wasn't really getting a job in that field. So I got a job in healthcare. I got a job as an ambulance personnel. And then from that, I went to nursing school later, and then I became a nurse, and that's what I've been working as for the past 15 years.
I see. What? How was that? Yeah, going from an eastern from the Eastern European bloc to U.S. to a Western country. Was there a cultural shock? Should have been.
Yeah, of course. Everything was different, but most cultural shock things I experienced were positive, like how clean things were, how orderly things were, how we never had like electrical outages, how we never had water outages, how you could just like turn the tap on and the hot water would come out all the time. Like it sounds kind of, weird to people who
Yeah.
never lived through, but like part of our life was like, uh-oh, it's almost 9 a.m. They're about to shut the water off. Let's fill all the pots and pans and let's make sure we fill the tub so we have something to like flush the toilet with when they turn off the water. Or like, oh, they're gonna turn electricity off at that time. Make sure you do your homework while the lights are on, or you're gonna have to be like using a candle, ruining your eyes. So the stuff like that was like everyday life, and we didn't really have any like action towards it. So we just learned to live around it. So like small things like that, like I just remember every time you come in the house, your shoes would just be a mess. It doesn't matter if it was like summer, winter, fall, any weather, you would come in and your shoes would look like you walk through like a field of mud. Just because streets were so dirty and beat up. It doesn't matter how careful you were. So like you would come in, you'd have to like wash your shoes in the hallway in the bucket. Like stuff like I don't think I've ever washed my shoes in the United States in like 20 some years. They just never get dirty. Like it's crazy.
No dust. There's no
Yeah, and
dust.
people will say, "Oh, New York is so dirty, the subway's so dirty." Like, but you can still walk around New York, go home, and basically walk around your apartment in your shoes, and you'll be fine. But on the cleanest day in Simferopol, you walk outside, you walk in your house, you better take your shoes off, or you're gonna have like mud and dirt and dust all over your little apartment. So it's stuff like that, and then of course bigger things like just the way people are. People are more friendly, I think, in the West. People say, oh, it's fake friendly. Like a lot of Eastern European people say, like, oh, it's like fake friendliness. Well, maybe, maybe not. But like I do find people generally to be more friendly, more disposed to like casual conversation and things like that, and eye contact, than it was me growing up. Not that everyone was like really mean or angry all the time, but just generally wasn't like you didn't strike up conversation with strangers. You kind of kept to business, right? Like
Yeah.
if you had to have a business transaction or interaction, you did that like in the store, in the market, but without chit chat, without, hey, how's it going? Without like, are you okay? Is everything all right? You just kind of came in there, you did your thing, keep your eyes down, turn around, leave.
Yeah, because
Uh,
the system was so you could not say anything because you are followed. Every word you could say could be turned against you. That was a system which worked against you. So you always were watching your back.
Yeah, you were always on alert. And also like I
Yeah,
think you just assumed you didn't say how's it going because you assumed everyone had like 1,000 problems that they were dealing with. Like, of course, how's it going? Like, how's it going? Like, we're all dealing with it. It's not going well. So why
yeah,
ask, right? Like you're just like, okay, you're alive, you're breathing, you have clothes on, so you're probably okay. Let's move on, stuff like that. But with friends and family, we had very close, warm relationships. Like I had great
yeah,
relationship with my friends, with my classmates, with my parents, friends. We had a wide circle of people that we had like really warm, close relationships with. We just didn't have that with strangers.
yeah. Um, and I think this still is present today in Eastern European countries. If you go on street and you smile to someone, no one will smile back. They'll
Right.
think there is something wrong. So
Right. They'll probably like, why is they
yeah,
smiling? Maybe
exactly.
they're like, yeah, maybe they're a little crazy or something.
So when you did probably you being 18, 18 is still a young enough age to easily be absorbed by the culture, the new culture which you found yourself in too. For your parents, was also it was easy also, or they had a harder, and was that hard for you also because um, they they found it harder?
Yeah, it was harder for them for sure. The older you are, the harder it is. Like I could see it in my family. My sister is only 4 years younger than me, but she was like the easiest, quickest, I think, to just like fit in. I was like right behind her, right? Just
Yeah,
fitting in more naturally. My parents, it took them years to really fit in. Like they fit in now, great, but it took them like a quite a long time. Whereas my grandmother, so my grandmother also lived here, um, and so while she lived here, she never really um, fit in.
fit in.
Like
Yeah,
she just kind of hung, it just never really quite got there. It was always, she always felt like she lived in a foreign country up until the day she died. Not necessarily in a bad way. Like she also enjoyed the fact that she had good health care, good, nice apartment, hot water all the time. So she grew up with like minimal, like she grew up with a house that was heated by a stove.
yeah,
So she had to like throw coals in the stove or her house went cold. So up until she immigrated. So we're not talking about some ancient, history. Like up until the day she left,
yes, yes,
Crimea, she lived in a house which had no central heating and no hot water. So she had to heat her water and heat her house to be livable. So, but yeah, she never assimilated. She learned a little English. She learned customs, but it never became a part of her. I probably within 2 or 3 years I was perfectly comfortable and kind of assimilated in the culture. My sister maybe like a year prior to that, and my parents probably took him another like 3, 4, 5 years after that to like truly be comfortable.
and you probably made in this period. Did you start playing games? Did you start finding games?
Yep, I was lucky accident, I guess. This we moved in this little neighborhood in the city of Milwaukee. None of us really knew about anything. We just kind of moved here because we had other people we knew here, so it made sense to live around people that could help you out. Um, and then it just happened that the neighborhood where I lived, like 3 blocks away from me, with this like really big, by the standards of the day, board game store, which was like one of the only ones in the city. I think if I lived elsewhere, the city's quite large. We didn't have a car for first, year or two, so I got everywhere by a bus. I might have never really acquired a taste for board games, but because I had the store, because I wandered in there one day, it's called Napoleon's, and I got, oh my God, look at all this stuff. It looks so great. These games, I wanted to play it. Again, I wasn't really primed for video games at the time. I wasn't like primed to seek out, and play video games, but I wanted to be entertained. So it seemed like a natural fit for me. I immediately started like coming there and like meeting people there, playing games with people. And that was kind of like my gateway into like a more modern gaming. Although still we're talking about the 90s. So this is before like the renaissance of gaming, like people talk about like 2000, this
Yeah,
explosion
yeah.
of games.
After 96, let's say.
Yeah, but yeah, it was mostly like we mostly play tabletop games actually. Like we had like a Warhammer 40K league and like Blood Bowl and a lot of like Games Workshop games.
American
Uh,
style games.
yeah, there was a lot of like RPGs. I didn't play those, but like things like BattleTech and this was pre like big flashy Euros.
Yeah.
So people didn't really play Euros all that much, which is ironic because that's what I design now. But like my first games were actually these like roll a bunch of dice and see what happens type of games. They were relatively expensive and time consuming. But I liked the part of the hobby that had to do with like collecting and painting miniatures almost as much as I like playing.
I see.
So that was like a big part of it for me.
Um, so you got it. You got the taste for. And when did you discover modern board games?
I think like actually like so I fell out of board gaming. I like kind of stopped playing 40K. I went to nursing school. I graduated. I moved to Jacksonville, Florida. Sort of lost all this, the group I left behind, the store I
Yeah,
left
because
behind, where I
Florida
lived in
is far away.
Jacksonville.
Florida,
Sorry.
Florida is far away from Milwaukee.
Yeah, Florida is far away, and also where I lived there wasn't like a thriving board game community of any kind. Um, and again, this is just like the beginning of like social, this was like 2007. I know it's not that long ago, but at that time there wasn't like all these like online meetups, like there was no TTS. I don't know if Board Game Geek was even around. If it was, I wasn't aware of it. I wasn't really aware of any of these like things because like we always just kind of did our meetups analog way. We just like call each other, be like, "Hey, bud, you want to go to Napoleon's?" Meet up in their basement and play some games, or like, hey, I'm gonna come over and play. We didn't really use all this like social media,
Yeah,
online stuff. We didn't watch reviews of games, didn't read blogs. We just kind of played the games we liked. And so like I moved to Florida and I'm like, well, there's nobody here. I'll just forget about it. And I kind of forgot about it. Like I sold my games collection before I moved, all my 40K stuff. So I really didn't have anything. And then I lived there for, several years and forgot all about it. And then when I moved back to Milwaukee in 2012, I was like, "Oh, I remember enjoying board games. Let's see what's happening with that." And then I was just like, "Oh, a lot happened in the past 5 years."
were
Uh,
you married by now? Were you?
yeah, well, I was dating my, my now wife then. So I met my wife and I started dating her. And then one day I was like, "Oh, hey, there's this board game I bought. Do you want to play it with me?" And she was like, "What? What's that?" Because like she didn't know me like that. Like, we actually met and we were like going to sports games and like playing soccer together, like doing a lot of like athletic stuff because I also like that a lot. Um, I was like a lot into like different types of sports. And so she was thinking of me as this like nurse first, kind of like sporty person. Didn't really think of me as someone who would sit down and play like a board game. So that
As
was a
a
bit of
geek.
a shock for her.
She couldn't perceive you as a geek.
Yeah, maybe she thought it was like a temporary thing. I just wanted to like do something one time.
Did
And then I was like, oh, this is pretty great. I'm just gonna keep doing this. And I don't know, for a while she thought it was just like a phase,
uh,
I think, with me. And then like I was like, oh, I want to design board games. And she was like, okay, like
so,
kind of like sure, like how
I
if
thought you
somebody
were
tells you they
cooler.
want
Huh?
to like
Did she?
learn how to whittle or something or how to like make birdhouses, they're like, okay, fine, it's your free time, do whatever the hell you want. Um, she didn't think I was going to take it so seriously at first.
I see. Did she thought at some moments? I thought you were cooler.
I don't know if she thought that. I don't know if it was endearing to her. It was definitely, I think it was weird, and she didn't know what to think about it, and she wasn't into it at first. But then she got into it. Now she has been into games quite a bit, and like really liking the fact that we have this hobby, really appreciating it because it's like an analog hobby in a really digital
And
kind of screen
yeah,
heavy world. And we have like a little girl, and the fact that we can all play these games together, there's no screens, there's no nothing. She really, really appreciates and likes that now, that really personal face-to-face experience that me and her are playing a campaign now. And so we get to kind of sit there and compete with each other in a very like close, person to person thing, which is not every couple gets to experience,
that, yeah,
right? It's
yep.
another thing that we get to do. So she really likes it. Now, at the time, I think it was a mixture of surprise and just kind of like dismissal, like, whatever, it's board games today. Next year it's gonna be, race cars, and the year after it's gonna be hot air balloons or whatever. But then like I just persisted at it, and then she was like, I eventually realized this wasn't going anywhere.
I see. What kind of a player are you?
Well, I'm analytical. I think I like to analyze games I play, like think about like all the cogs and things that make things move and why the rules are there. So as I play the game, I tend to analyze it in my head. So I don't just always just like experience it, right? Like just on surface level. I tend to deconstruct it a little bit. So I'm like the guy in the, you give them like a radio, and first thing they want to do is take it apart and see what's inside of it,
Yep.
before they start listening to it. That's me with board games.
So today, what kind of games do you play? You started with the Ameritrash when we were a
Yeah, I
child.
don't even
Now,
know if it's even a merit. I mean, like it's a tabletop games that just a really heavy luck to skill ratio, and they're very like
yeah.
it's its own almost. I don't know. I wouldn't do it now. Like it was a crazy time. The amount of time you have to be a single young man with no family, no kids, and to be able to do this because the amount of time and money it takes to collect, paint, and model these things and play these 4 hour games that a lot of times boil down to just chucking dice. I know I'm probably gonna like turn a lot of people off that like these games. If you like these games, that's great. I have nothing against you or your hobby, but personally, I think it's crazy for me to like spend like weeks collecting this army, an hour setting it up, and then roll a bunch of ones and lose. So if you like this stuff,
Yeah, more
great.
power to you.
I've been there. I know it feels great to see these painted, beautiful armies and these beautiful terrain tables. It looks awesome. But I found the experience of actually playing these games very, very disappointing.
Um, so today, I gather by what you're designing, you play more Euro games than you used to.
Yeah,
Do,
yeah. I
do,
play more Euro games. The latest game we just had like a friend over, and we played Terraforming Mars: Ares Expedition, which is for those who don't know, like a card
card game.
version of
Yeah.
Terraforming Mars. And then we also played Bonanza, which is like a 25-year-old
Yep.
game about trading beans, which is like a nice casual game, but with a decent amount of like thinking to it and like player interaction.
Yeah. Uwe
And
20
my
years
wife and
ago.
I, we played Undaunted Stalingrad right now against each other.
I see. I see.
Um, so that's kind of where I am in this like period of time.
Do you enjoy playing, I don't know, social deduction games, more social games? Do you get the chance to play
No,
them?
not really. I mean, not social deduction. Like I've played them, but that's not my favorite. I do like more mechanically driven games. I like. Don't get me wrong. I like some luck and tension in games too, as long as it's not overpowering. I do enjoy that. I don't like games that's just completely mechanical and completely mathematic. But social deduction isn't necessarily my favorite, but I like games that have a strong social sort of interaction part in it. Like, for example, I think Undaunted definitely has it. Like, there's definitely this like back and forth kind of um, adversity in it that you can really feel when you play it. And like games like Bonanza, where you're like trying to convince people to do something that helps you and hurts the other
Yeah,
person, but it's within the rules and framework of the game. It's not this weird free flowing thing. The games, they just basically boil down to lying to each other. I'm not a huge fan of like Resistance, Werewolf,
no, no.
Secret Hitler, where it's basically like, okay, they're fun, but in the end of the day, it just boils down to like, do you trust this person? Do you not trust them? You're just kind of making these judgment calls with little to no information most of the time.
Well, there is some information there. You can,
You
there is
can,
the
right? You can,
fun.
but
I mean,
I don't know. It's just I feel like those aren't my favorite
yeah,
games.
I see, I
I'll
see,
play them if people want to play them, but I'm not never going to be like getting a group together for a one night werewolf session or something.
I see. Um, let's go to talk a bit about when did you start thinking, well, I like playing these games, but now I would like to do a game of my own. When did that idea start creeping into your head?
Yeah. Well, ironically, it was actually when I lived in Jacksonville. I remember it was like maybe '09 or something like that. I had this brief like this boredom, whatever. I had like not a lot going on and or something, and I'm like, oh, I remember playing board games, and I was reading George R. R. Martin books at the time, Game of
Game of
Thrones, and I
Thrones,
was like
yeah.
really taken with the universe, and I was
Uh,
like,
It's not Game of. I think it's the book is called. It's not Game of Thrones. It's
Yeah, the Song of Ice and
the side
Fire, right?
exactly the Song of Ice
Yeah,
and
yeah,
Fire.
yeah. So yeah, that became the Game of Thrones,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
the
The
the series.
series.
But
Yeah.
yeah, so I was reading those books and was really like taking with the universe, and I kind of wanted to like do something else with it, right? And so I was like, oh, maybe I'll make this game. And I remember some of the old games I played, and I sort of threw together this like game, version of what, it could have been. And it was like a really brief sort of like foray into design where it kind of came together in a way that like I even got a couple of my friends to kind of play it. I thought it was just like a weird and strange thing that they didn't hate it, but like it didn't go anywhere. I kind of made it and then kind of forgot about it. So it was like a very brief window. And so then when I got to move back to Wisconsin and I started playing board games again, I thought about it. I was like, oh, I had a lot of fun kind of working on that game, um, and maybe I should make another one. And I did, and that was to become Dice Hospital actually.
I see.
And
Yeah,
I
yeah.
was as a nurse already for several years. So it's like, oh, I'm gonna make a game about managing emergency department because that's what I do is I'm emergency department nurse. It's like I'm gonna make like about like being a charge nurse in the emergency department and kind of like sending your nurses to different patient rooms and having your patients being treated. And I was like, and my patients are gonna be dice, like just sort of like med libbed it, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
then, and that was my design. I saw it through. I play tested it. I bought some really basic art from an art student, local art student, kind of put it all together and put it on the Game Crafter, which is like a local, print on demand service. And sort of that was it for me. Like I kind of left it at that. I felt like mission was accomplished. I made a game, and it was available for sale if someone would wanted to like buy
Buy
it
it.
from Game.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then someone, reached out for me from the UK who saw the game on GameCrafter and they were like, "Well, I like it, and I think I want to publish it as an actual game." And that was like my kind of a break into the industry as like a design, not just a self-published designer, but somebody who's being published by others.
I see. So Dice Hospital was your first published design.
I think so. Yeah. So the timeline on it is like weird because I also signed lockup. So when the publisher for Dice Hospital reached out to me, it took them quite a long time to actually like sign papers with me. Like
I
they
see.
they wanted to look at it, they wanted this and that. Like the months went by, but it gave me like confidence to like pursue design. And then I designed this other game that was to become lockup, the role player tale. And I showed that to a couple of people at like different meetups, and then publishers got interested in that. So I think I actually signed lockup possibly
Possibly
before.
before. Okay.
Possibly I signed it before, but Dice Hospital then he did sign finally for it, and then that physically came out before Lockup did, because then Lockup had to spend all this time, to get the art and development and everything else.
Eh,
So I think the timeline is kind of weird because it's like they got
yeah,
signed
yeah.
kind of close, but Lockup probably before that, but then Dice Hospital came out before. It's just a normal publishing stuff. Like this happens all the time.
And how long did it take this road of thinking, of becoming a designer, to finally seeing a game published?
Well, I would say normally, well, everyone's experience is different
Of
with it.
course.
A lot of my
For
games, they sort
yours.
of take,
No, no, no. For your first. So since you started until you saw your first game published, how long did it take?
oh, from the time that I designed it to the time it was
From
published,
the
you mean?
time from the time you started designing your first game,
Yeah,
to the time you first got to see a game of yours published.
sure. I see what you're saying. So I think 2 years, I want to say. It's like about 2 years. Um, yeah, because I designed it, it was in GameCrafter for a while, then like it got signed and it went on Kickstarter, it got produced. So yeah, it was at least a couple years. I think I made it in like 14. or something like that, and it came out in 16.
And
Like physical copy arrived to me.
and
Yeah.
and in the meantime, did you shelve anything else?
Well, while that was going on, then the Rurik came. Like I no, I kept right designing because I was like, oh, this is great. People like my games. I should make more games. And so I basically like never really stopped designing. Like as soon as Lockup got signed, I started working on Rurik. What to become Rurik. I mean, I
Okay,
didn't
yeah, yeah,
call it
yeah.
that. But that was my next one.
Okay, because I have a question here, hello Rado, which says, is game design worth pursuing? Which I think is a good question to ask.
I think it could be. I think it could be worth pursuing. Like it definitely wasn't for me, but I would say like a game design, you shouldn't like really only do it for to become like a widely known or like financially independent based on that because there is a quite high failure
Rate.
rate
Yeah.
too. So it's not like a very good bet to like put all your eggs in one basket. But for me, like my experience was that I had a good job. I still work as a nurse, part time. And so like I have this like stable job. So then my free time I can dedicate to game design as like a job, but I also got a lot of like enjoyment out of it. So my first two, three designs, I wasn't really getting, money for. I was signing games, but there was no money coming in. But I was having a lot of fun designing. So it was a reward in its own. So for me at that time, even if like I didn't get much money or anything, it would just be cool to do it. So I think at the first stages, it's good to look at it. It's like a hobby job where like, sure, you're trying to get, some compensation for your time, but like you're also trying to break into the industry. You're also trying to like make a name for yourself, but you're also having a lot of fun, hopefully. So as long as it's true, because we're all gonna do something with our free time, right? Whether we're gonna sit, play video games, whether we're gonna like hang out with our friends, you gotta make sure that it's just something you want to do and something that's great for you to do, like, and then it's gonna be worth it.
Um, do you have a design philosophy?
Well, yeah, I mean, I've kind of developed it over time. I looked at different things that worked, and I mostly try to make an experience like based designs, meaning that what I want people to do is when they start playing, I want them to have like a nice experience. However, I get there, whether it's through mechanics, whether it's through like thematic things, whether it's through, giving them something new, something they haven't seen before. That's the ultimate goal because you can make a lot of games that quote unquote work, like everything kind of makes sense and
Yeah, yeah,
logical
yeah,
and
yeah.
points get earned, but are people gonna have like fun? Are they gonna have like a good experience playing it or an experience, right? So I always try to see like when I play test people's reactions as they play. Are their eyebrows going up? Are their like faces lighting up? Are they smiling? Are they saying like, "Ooh, this is cool"? That's what I kind of want. If I get that in the play tests, then that tells me to work to keep pursuing this because like okay, this is good, right? Like I get this a little wow, and it's not going to blow anyone's mind. I mean, these are just board games in the end of the day, but I am looking for that to get something like really positive, kind of like not a forced thing, but just like naturally people get a positive like emotion out of playing a game.
Yeah,
So I try to coax that out of the game.
I see. Um, so naturally, going into the next theme of discussion, you go from theme to mechanisms, or go from mechanisms to theme,
Um, you know,
because there are everyone works differently.
yeah, for me it's design by design. So like with Lockup, for example, well, Dice Hospital, I wanted to make a game about managing a department. So clearly I had the theme in mind. With Lockup, it was almost simultaneously because I wanted to make like this kind of diceless game, so I didn't want to make two dice games back to back. So I was like, well, it diceless games, and I thought it would be fun to do like a semi-blind bidding game because I haven't really seen very many of those, and I thought it would be an interesting like mechanism that would like get people excited. But then also like almost immediately I was like, well, I don't want it to be, another dungeon crawl games. I was like, ooh, it would be cool if it was like fantasy creatures in prison or something. So it's almost simultaneous for that one. And then back to Rurik, um, I kind of wanted to make this, like a game based on Eastern European, uh, like Kiev and Rus specifically
Yeah,
history.
yeah,
And right, so it's weird because it ebbs and flows. With Endless Winter though, I had to retheme it completely because the original Endless Winter was not about Paleolithic people at all. I designed the whole game around like space, like futuristic kind of space exploration, space colonies game. And then I found that to be like again like more just a more common theme that was less exciting. And then I ended up retheming completely for Endless Winter. So that one you could say the mechanisms were completely kind of established
yeah.
before I
You
themed
did
it.
the theme, yeah.
It's yeah, so it really varies from game to game.
Um, Probably when you started, this was not as prevalent, but uh, the more you design, the do you feel or how much you playtest? How long you
Um,
playtest?
Yeah, so quite a bit. Like playtesting is really, really important because again, there's certain things you can't get from just doing it like mathematically or modeling it, like people's reactions, right? Like you have to see what people's reaction is, and you can't just do it with the same people because like then you're gonna get the same reactions. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to get a big enough sample of players. Like we play tested Urix so much, and we saw all these people play it. Like we had people come in who were like heavy Euro gamers who would say, "Oh, this is an easy light game." We had people who come in and say like, "Oh my God, this game has so much rules. I'm so overwhelmed." We had like people in the middle, people who don't really play gaming, people who play board games all the time, people who hate dudes on the map, people who never heard of Kievan Rus or people who are like Kievan Rus like enthusiasts, and they all had certain similar reaction to some things in the game that got us thinking, okay, that is the centerpiece of the game, that is the best part of it, that is like consistently well received no matter who my person is. So that is still going forward. Is kind of like what I do is I try to expose a bunch of people, get all kinds of different people touching the game, even if they're like, "Oh, I hate these types of games." If they have time, if they want to give me their time, even though they hate it, like I don't expect them to love it, but I want to see is there one thing, two things that even though they don't like the game, they still liked in the game. So that's an important piece of information. You can only get it in the personal playtest that you're observing.
Yep. And probably in the diversity of testers.
Right.
Um, Now, when you mostly work alone, do you enjoy that? Do you enjoy that play working more alone than with someone else?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really co-design per se. Most of my games end up being developed by someone, but and sometimes I do participate. Like with Rurik, I did a ton of development. Like I was in touch with the publisher all the time, on the phone, email, in touch with the developer, back and forth. For some games, there was very little. Like I designed a game called Old West Impresario, where I basically handed them over the rules. They asked me for a couple of
TMG.
things, and that was it.
Yeah.
So it varies. I do, I don't mind working with other people as long as we're like what I don't like is like parallel design, where like I'm designing a game and then their own guy in house is doing, and then I have no idea what they're doing. They have no idea what I'm doing. Then we're like get together. Turns out we were like duplicating things. or they're doing completely different from what I was thinking, that's not ideal because then it feels like a waste of time for everyone. But if someone is like with me, like if we coordinated everything, I'm totally open to that process. Otherwise, I think it's better to stage it like I hand in the design, they do changes, they hand it back to me, I change some things, or I give feedback, it goes back to them. Well, like I said, the worst thing is like this parallel design where someone's working on it, you working on it, and it's just ends up being a mess. But yeah, working together is fine. I've co-designed a game. Unfortunately, was never made because the publisher for it suddenly passed away. But I co-designed a game with Dustin Oakley, and we did it together, like in the same room with the publisher, playing every week, making changes together, dividing tasks, and it was a blast. Like we had the game signed and everything, but then unfortunately the publisher passed away, and then the game just
Mm.
disappeared in the ether. But
Minion
but
Games.
I
It
really
was
liked it.
it was with Minion Games.
Yeah, yeah, it was James Matthew. It was for Minion Games, right?
Okay.
It was supposed to be the next entry in the series that he has, like the Energy Empire and
Oh, yeah, yeah.
all that. But I only bring it up to say that I do like that process, but I think my personal feeling is a true co-design, right? Like if you want to be called my co-designer, I want to be called your co-designer. We need to be in the same room, coordinating everything, being on the same page, working as a team, not like, oh, I got this design and I gave it to Fred, and then Fred added some rules, so now, I'm putting Fred's name as a co-designer.
I see.
To me, that's a fine line that some people might disagree, but I feel like there's you know, a design is like the initial design is a really important time consuming part, and they need to be there for that and share that burden with you. And like the generating those ideas and generating all this early content. Because if you give me a game that's mostly functional, mostly established, has a theme, mechanics, blah, 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 it's a lot easier for me to work with. I can do whatever with it.
That's called development. And now we want to go. I want to go to this. You do not develop your own games?
I do.
You
I
do?
do.
You do?
Yeah, I do. Like I said, I did a ton on Rurik specifically.
And
Like where there was constantly like this rule doesn't work or this rule feels weak or we need to, what else can we do with these cards? Can you design extra cards? Can you design this? Can you design that? And I kept just doing it, like this, that, and the other. Same with Endless Winter. It was developed heavily by Johnny Pack, but prior to him coming in, they were like, well, we want extra cards for this, for that. These things don't work. These things need rebalancing. So he did a bunch of that too. That's prior to him coming in and doing even more stuff. But the thing about it is like not so I don't know if this makes sense, but I'm gonna say it like this. Not every developer is a designer, but almost every designer is a developer because even before you sell your game, you have your initial design, you have your initial thing, but now you're play testing it. What are you doing? You're making changes, you're adding things, you're removing things, you are developing it. Like
yeah, yeah,
those things are inseparable. The only way you don't develop your game is you literally just designed it, handed it over to someone, and never touched it again.
yeah.
It's like a one-shot thing.
But
It-
and
right.
I'm coming to something which I find really important. I'm an artist. I know how it is to have to create something from zero, from scratch, and sometimes it's hard to cut your own work. That's why. How do you find hard to take this hat off, the hat of the designer, and then put the hat of? Of course, you want the best product ever, but you are so inside. You are sometimes so involved that not always you will see rough edges.
Yeah,
How
yeah.
how do you manage to balance this relationship inside you as a designer and developer?
That's a great question. I mean, to just keep this like matter, this parallel with paint with being like an artist, right? Somebody who may be like visual artist. Like it's a difference between making a product for someone for hire sometimes and making something for yourself. When you working with a client, you get your brief, you get your like parameters, and then I get on board with that right away. I'm not gonna take on the job if I don't get on board with it. Like if excuse me, what you telling me makes sense to me, If I like where you're going with it, then I'm already on board with it. That means going down this path, even if like you trying to ask me to change some things in my design I really like, I'm already on board with that. I'm already okay changing it. Versus like my own game that I designed, I developed, I polished. I know that game's gonna have changes to it and I'm fine with it. A lot of times those changes are for the better. Sometimes those changes are motivated by other things, and that could be okay too. A lot of development moves I find in my experience are not necessarily making it worse or better. They're just kind of lateral. They're used to accommodate things like production, maybe games appearance, maybe people they want some sort certain components in it that they're known for. They want their own universe to be there, like lockup. Like I rethemed it um, to be this lockup universe, and it was a lot of fun and it's great. I'm glad I got an opportunity to do that. Is it like so much better? No, but it's a good step. The publisher got to continue their really cool own universe with role player. So a lot of stuff is like that, but that's why I have my own publishing now. Like I released a game called Resurgence. I'm going to release a game called Nova Roma, and those are the games that I design, I develop. I'm in charge of producing the components, deciding what things go in the game. I have complete control over it creatively, and
Yep.
so I don't have to necessarily change it just because someone wants, my, game to have a different theme or have a different, they really want this one thing to be in it. I get to decide that. So I think that's kind of my difference between like doing a game for someone else for
Uh,
hire with or designing your own
so
game
you
and
you
pub.
trust yourself enough to put the developer hat.
I do trust myself enough. I also do use outside help, so I don't do this in the vacuum. Like my playtesting, like we have a regular playtesting group, and a lot of guys in my playtesting groups are designers, some published designers, um, who are just as smart as I am, and they give me great advice, and I listen to this advice, and my games get better. I don't just say like, oh no, 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 like I don't want to listen to anyone. It is what it is. I make a ton of changes. Even my wife play tests a lot, and she has very good, like
Pointers.
instinct for things.
I
And,
see.
and so she gives me a lot of good feedback. So the games still get, even if you are like in charge of development, you're still going to change your game a ton as you're listening to feedback. And there's no other way to really make a decent game. Like you can't just make it by yourself and trust yourself completely to make no mistakes, to make everything right. Then you're definitely not going to make a good game. I almost guarantee it. But if you have all these different people play a game, give you feedback, you take the best of it, you make the best possible changes, and then these other people play it and they say they like it, they have a good emotional reaction to it, good experience with it, then that reinforces your feeling like, okay, you're on the right path, you're making a good game.
I see. Um, what is fun to you?
I mean, to me, it's discovering new things in the context of either like games mechanics or some sort of interaction or some sort of like even it could be like a narrative driven something in the game that's like fresh and novel. Most games I tend to seek out that have something I haven't seen before. It doesn't have to be completely revolutionary, but it's just not the same old same, right? It's not just another, zombicide game, but this time this zombicide game is in the Middle Ages, and next time it's going to be during Renaissance, and next time it's going to be in space. It's a new game. It's a new mechanic. It's a new experience, a new interaction, new way to upgrade your cards, new way to run a campaign. Whatever it is, that's what I'm looking for. That's where the fun is for me to look at this new thing, play it, and be like, is it better? Is it worse? Is it different? Even if I like it less, maybe than other games, like maybe it's like a new mechanic and I tried, I'm like, it's not great. It makes me happy that I tried it and experienced it.
I see. What is your most? Oh, before we go to this, could you talk us a bit about a day in your life? How is the day of Stan Kordonskiy goes by?
Sure. So it depends on whether I work or not. So a lot of times I work 12-hour shifts or, 8 to 12 hours. So those days that I work in the hospital, those are usually my, hospital days. I get up, I get my morning routine done, I have my breakfast, and I go to the hospital. I work there all day. I come home, and then it's evening time, it's dinner time. Maybe I watch a little TV before I go to bed. Look for news about war in Ukraine and all that other stuff. You read my news feeds. Um, don't do much in those days, other than like I just kind of in my work mode, in my kind of nurse hospital mode. On the days that I don't, my little girl, she's going to school. I take her to school. I drop her off. I come home. And then I have a list of things I need to do. So I start going down my list, the emails I have to answer. Sometimes I have an interview like today, so I have that pleasure of doing that. Talking, sometimes people send me questions about games I published, or backers of Resurgence have like issues, or like I have new sets, so I'm like putting things in the boxes and putting labels and things, kind of doing like housekeeping. Then I have my what games am I working on? What stage are they in? Right, like right now, I'm heavy in the Nova Roma pre-launch.
Yep.
Um, so I'm doing a lot of that, but also like I'm working with Fantasia on some things. They haven't announced them yet, so I'm not gonna go too much into it. But I'm
Okay,
working
okay.
on some things with them, so I have those things I have to do, and so I kind of go down the list, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna try to take care of these things. So a lot of it is I make a task list for myself for the days that I'm not in the hospital, and then I usually try to carve. Um, excuse me.
No, none.
I usually try to carve at least like an hour and a half a day so I can like get out of the house, go to the gym, get a little workout in, kind of like reinvigorate myself a little bit. And then I come back home, I pick up my little girl from school in the afternoon. We come home, we have lunch, usually like some activities with her. I might play a game with her or something. And then if she's kind of like busy doing homework, busy playing, I'll go and I'll get some more stuff done. Like I'll do some more, some more tasks from my list. Create another task list because a lot of times, like, oh, I did this, but now because I did this, I got to do these things. Um, and that's pretty much it. That's kind of how I do it on the
I see.
my average day.
I see. What is your most played game
Well, let's see. My most played game probably.
outside
Um,
the one you play tested for yourself, of course?
Right, yeah, I don't want to count my games I
Yeah,
design because
yeah.
obviously I play those
No.
games like ad nauseum,
Yep.
so that wouldn't be fair. The game that's not mine that I play a lot, do the app games count?
Mm.
Like board games on the apps?
um, yeah, yeah, okay.
Because so the reason I'm saying it is like one of the hardest things sometimes with the board games is like getting people to
Getting people
play
to play.
them.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I
yeah.
do play, like I play Race for the Galaxy app a lot, and I play Mystic Vale app a lot. Those are like the app games that I play a lot. I mean, Terraforming Mars is probably like the physical game that I've seen a lot of plays over the years. Like I keep coming back to it.
I see.
The campaign games because just campaign games if they have 11, 12 games, whatever, if you get through it.
Mhm.
Clank is another favorite of mine. I've played Clank, Base Clank, Clank in
But
Space,
you
and
don't know
Clank
which
is
one you played the most. No, don't
I
know.
you know I don't know which a single game because I don't really keep track of it, so I just kind of go by feeling.
Yeah, by
Like it
feeling, yeah.
feels like.
But the way you said, probably Race for the Galaxy because it's fast and you can play a lot of games of this.
Yeah, probably Race for the Galaxy. It's probably between Mystic Vale and Race for the Galaxy, but only on the app because I find Mystic Vale is actually like very time consuming to play physically because of all the like
Yeah, yeah,
making and unmaking
yeah,
cards is really time
yeah,
consuming for a
yeah,
game that's relatively short. Like I can play a game in like 15 minutes on my app, but if I play it in real life, it takes like an hour because of all the other things.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, I'll probably Mystic Veil. I probably played even more than I've played.
Race.
I Race, yeah.
Yeah. And do you have a favorite game?
No, I really don't because it's so impossible to pick. Like some games I like because they're short and sweet. Some games I like because they're unique. Some games I like because I like maybe table presence and the way they look like impacts it. So I really don't. I could pick like a favorite game based on circumstances. Like they'll say, you have a bunch of people coming who don't play board games. What's your favorite game to play? Or you have a bunch of your friends from back in the day getting together. What game will you play? Or like you can play a game with like a design, famous designer. What game would you play? I could probably try to answer that. But there's just too many good games that are too different from each other. Like
Yep.
you can't even compare them.
Yep. So, um, and my last question here is, do you have a no? It's not the last. It's second to last. Do you have a favorite designer?
Um, let's see. I no, I don't think I do. I tend to like so I'm thinking about it from a standpoint like what designer do I play that I never like disliked their game? I think like Alexander Pfister is one of them. I never really played a game by him, whether or not I thought it was like fantastic or great. Like some I really, really liked, other ones I just liked. I've never like disliked.
It's
Doesn't mean
like,
he's
yeah,
my favorite, but consistently, like I can think of him as someone like if you said you have an Alexander Pfister game, I would have no reservations about playing it
playing it.
because I've never had a bad time with his games. Um,
I see. That's not a bad choice, though.
Yeah.
Um,
So let's go with him. His designs really good games that really I like personally.
um, and my last question is: would you want to add something that I might not have asked you in this part of the interview?
Oh, nah, I don't think so. I mean, you covered things pretty well, so I feel like folks watching their interview should pretty get a pretty good idea of me as a designer, maybe even as a person a
As
little
a
bit.
person, yeah, that's the idea.
Yeah.
And now let's finish with my questionnaire. This questionnaire was invented by Marcel Proust. It is two. It normally it has two sets of questions. From these two sets of questions, Bernard Pivot made 10 questions, which were taken by James Lipton. If you have heard of him, he did Inside Actor Studio.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
And from there I have taken them without shame. And my first question is, what is your favorite word? You can say it
My
in
favorite
Russian if you want to.
my
Favorite
my
word.
favorite word.
Word, yeah.
Oh my. My favorite word is let's go with discombobulated.
what's what's this word?
It describes a state of being kind of like unsure, uncoordinated, unprepared, like caught by
I see.
surprise or kind of like unawares. That's often
Discombobulated.
what I find myself with my designs.
Discombobulated.
Discombobulated. Yep.
Sorry, I'm noted it.
Yeah, for sure. I
Uh,
think I say that quite a bit.
what is your least favorite word?
My least favorite word is probably boogers.
Boogers.
Yeah, I don't like word boogers.
What turns you on creatively, emotionally, or spiritually?
Um, what turns me on is like creatively is seeing a novel idea that's like well implemented in any medium, like film, written, game, video game, board game, whatever. If I see like, oh my God, this new idea is great and they really like did it justice, it makes me like immediately to like stop being lazy and start getting creative.
What turns you off?
I think the opposite of that is turn off. When somebody just like, I'm just doing the same thing again because it sold the first time, because people kind of liked it the first time. Here it is again, slightly repackaged, same thing,
I
buy it
see.
again. Be a big turn off.
What is your favorite curse word?
My favorite, well, I have a seven, almost, she's turning seven tomorrow, actually. So I have to really but
Disguise your curse words.
I curse in Russian. So here's what I do is if I really need to mutter something under my breath, is I will do it probably in Russian before I do
In English.
I say suka sometimes under my breath, which is like a kind of like a son of a bitch
Okay.
in Russian.
Okay.
And when when I like hit my finger with a hammer, I drop a really small piece on the floor and it rolls under the couch. I say like yes, that's so that we'll go with that.
What sound or noise do you love?
I actually like the sound of a train. I like being on a train where it like goes over the rails and it makes like that tuk tuk
Tick,
tuk
tick,
tuk
tick, tick,
tuk tuk
tick, tick, tick,
sound.
tick. Yeah.
Yeah, I find that very soothing.
What sound or noise do you hate?
I hate the sound of the monitor alarms at my job where I'm in a hospital and every time there is the least bit abnormal thing, it goes like meh, meh, and it happens like every minute of every day because there's like 50,000 monitors. So at least one of them is going off at any given time. And you think I would get used to it in 15 years they hadn't changed the sound, and you never get used to it.
Probably that's why it is like that. Probably
Yeah.
that's why the
Yeah.
sound is
Yeah.
like that.
They found the sound that human beings cannot. The only worst thing is if like it was also like a crying baby sound at the same time.
um, which profession outside the ones you already do would you like to attempt?
Um, I mean, it's I always wanted to like write something. I always like wanted to be like write a book. Like I don't even care, like children's book, book of jokes. I think I would have liked being a writer, like a profession of writing, but I was just never good in it. So don't expect a book from me. But I always like making up and telling stories since I was a kid. I'm just not very good at actually writing things. So but yeah, well, writer, I would think a writer.
With what profession you would not like to attempt?
I don't think I would like to be like I wouldn't want to be a military person. I find like that structural regimented thing is not for me. I wouldn't want to be in any environment like where, I have to like constantly take order. Even if I get to give orders, I don't care. There's always someone giving orders. I don't like that sort of like so nothing with military.
I see. And my last question is, which should be interesting for Eastern European born person. If heaven exists, what would you expect God to say to you when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Um I hope he would say, "Oh, you that guy that designed those board games, right? I think I heard about you."
I see. And on that note, we will finish this interview. Thank you a lot, Stan, for doing this interview. I hope you had fun. I hope you liked it here on our virtual gaming room in the virtual comfortable chairs. I can tell you they're comfortable. I don't know how you felt.
Yeah, very good. Thank you so much for having me. It was a blast.
And I would kindly ask you to not close the conversation. We'll speak a bit afterwards.
Okay.
I will close the interview. Again, thank you. You want to say something in the end? So before I
No, thanks again. It was great to be here. Thanks to everyone who watched this. I'll see you next time.
thank you again, I will finish it by saying that I want to thank everyone who came and watched live. I want to thank everyone who comes and watches after the fact. If you come live, just say hello. We are uh, happy to interact. And if you have a question, I will ask my guest usually. So until next time, all I have to say, I will thank again Stan for coming and doing Stanislav. That's his whole name for coming and doing this playthrough. Until next time, all I have to say what it says here, which it's in Romanian, but I always translated it when it says play a lot, play loads, as you Brits say, have fun, and bye bye, fine folks, wherever in the world you are.